Hi everyone, before the video starts, I just want to quickly apologise about the lighting. At the time of filming this, we were in the middle of getting our roof fixed. Also, I understand this will be a long video, so I will have the tools listed down below with links to the Ryobi website for each tool and a timestamp for each tool, so you can skip to the tool you want to see the review of. Hi everyone, I'm Adam from The Guards Woodworker, and currently we're doing renovations on the roof, and I had to clear out all my tools out of the workshop. And I figured while I've got all my Ryobi tools out, I would do a quick review on them all and show off my collection. Now, just want to quickly say I am not affiliated with Ryobi, I just like their tools, but if you want to sponsor me, Ryobi, hit me up. I'll go through all the Ryobi One Plus tools that I have first, and then I'll get onto the bigger stuff. So the first thing I'll go with is the palm router, or trim router I think they call it. I like the trim router, it has good power, I've never had issues with that, but the way you adjust the base is this little latch here that you lock on and off, and I just find that it never holds tight enough. No matter how tight I make the screw, it always moves, and I find that I'll be routing a groove and then next thing I know it's made itself deeper because this latch just is not strong enough. Next I'll go on to the jigsaw. Now I have actually used this jigsaw to cut the top out of a 55-gallon oil drum and it did not miss a beat. I've never had any issues cutting through any wood with it or anything like that. It's powerful enough for what I use it for. It also has this little laser that you can turn on and off to help you follow your lines. I do like that feature, it does actually work quite well. Next we'll talk about my drills. So I actually had this old drill that I was drilling a hole through metal underneath a trailer and the gear inside broke. Other than that, I had it for about 5 years and never had an issue with it. I think I just used it a bit too much, too hard at the time. So I ended up replacing it with the newer E-Torque model, which I actually like a lot better. Mainly I use my driver for screws. I find that the driver actually has a bit too much power. I think they do make an adjustable version now. It does have a bit too much power sometimes when you're putting in screws. Next up is the multi-tool. Now, I used to use the multi-tool quite a lot. I still use it every now and then, but I have other tools now that I use instead. I do find that it cuts really good through acrylic and thin MDF. Next up is the Random Orbital Sander. Now, this is the only handheld, say, sheet style sander that I own. I do find that it bogs down a little bit if I push just that little bit too hard, but it's also the first Random Orbital Sander I've ever owned, so I don't know if they all do that. Maybe I'm just using it wrong, I don't know. But I just find if I push down too much, it just bogs down a little bit. Next up is the hot glue gun. Now, I don't know if this is just Ryobi specific or if all of the glue guns are the same. Maybe the technology is not there, I'm not sure. But I just find that it takes quite a while to warm up. I think it takes about 30 seconds, but for myself, I just find that's too long. Now, I use this every year to put up my Christmas lights on the brickwork, that sort of thing. And I just have to leave it on the entire time and I get glue everywhere. It would be really good if you could just turn it on, 5 seconds later, put a dab of glue, turn it off and it cools down. But other than that, I find that it works really well. I've never had an issue with it. Next up is the radios. Now I know this is not really a tool per se. This radio is the first one they came out with, and I used to use this radio all the time. This one, you can plug your phone in with the aux cable, the radio. I do find that if I have it at the back of the shop, it doesn't like to pick up the radio stations as much. If I put it out near the garage door with the garage door open, it picks them up fine. I don't know if that's interference in the house or if it's just the aerial's not the best. Now, I got this other radio for my wife, and this one has Bluetooth compatibility. I do like that feature, but again, the aerial just doesn't seem to pick up stations too well in the back of the shop, and she doesn't use it anymore, so I sold it. Next, we have the handheld vacuum. Now, this was actually bought for inside the house, just to vacuum the lounge and stuff. For what I used it for, I found it worked really well. I've never actually used it in the shop, and I actually I feel like it wouldn't do good in vacuuming up sawdust, that sort of stuff. I don't think that's what it was actually made for. I think it was made for cleaning the car, the house, that sort of stuff. Next, we have the Buffer Polisher. I've only used this once, and I actually got this as a prize from Ryobi. I won one of their Instagram contests, and I won $1,000 worth of tools, and this was one of the things that I chose, because honestly, I already have everything I wanted. There was some tools that I wanted, for instance, the bandsaw, which is quite expensive, and the pressure washer, for instance. This was more just to make up the money. I've used it once and I found that it bogs down really quickly. I've never actually used a buffer polisher before, so maybe you're not supposed to put any pressure, but I feel any bit of pressure and it just bogs down. But I found that it did work really well. Next up we have, I'm pretty sure they call it a rotary tool. Now I've used this a couple of times since I got it. Again, this was another thing that I got in the prize from Ryobi on the Instagram contest. And I've used it a couple of times and I do really like it. It has an adjustable speed function, and it spins up very quickly. I use the cutoff disc in the Petgate build to cut off part of the bracket that was sticking out, and it cut through it, no issues at all. Actually, it was probably a little bit, I probably actually had it set a bit too high in the speed, but it cut through the metal, no issues with the cutoff blade. Next up, we have the reciprocating saw. Again, this is another tool that I got in the Instagram contest. I actually have wanted a reciprocating saw for a very long time, and I have used it more since I got it than some other tools that I have since I got them. I find that it cuts through everything very well. I actually used it in an upcoming video. I needed to cut a slab in half, and there was just a thin piece down the middle that the table saw wasn't high enough to reach. Now, an issue that I did have, and I'm not sure where I put the blade, I bought a really long blade that was a weird triangle shape, and it didn't fit in, would lock into the part, but then it couldn't move because the blade was too high up here. I think this opening needs to be bigger. I actually used the rotary tool to cut down the blade so that it would fit in and make it not as wide like this one is. Next up is the leaf blower. I use this blower a lot, all the time. I'm always blowing all the sawdust out onto the driveway, cleaning up out the driveway, all that sort of stuff. We have a lot of trees outside, so we get a lot of leaves on the driveway, and it does a great job at cleaning them up. Next up is the circular saw. Now this is one of the older circular saws that they brought out. I think it might have been the first or one of the first ones. It's from 2013. I actually never use this circular saw. I found that it has a lot of issues. It always bogged down cutting through the wood that I wanted to, in saying that I was cutting through pallets and stuff. I think if you used it to cut down sheet goods, it would probably work really well. But I have a corded one that I use for all my cutting when I need a circular saw now. It does have a laser on it like the Jigsaw, and I do like that feature, but I honestly just don't use it anymore. It probably just needs a new blade, I don't know. Okay, next up is my final Ryobi One Plus tool. All the rest of my tools are corded, and this is my favorite. It is the 18 gauge brad nailer. I use this in almost every single project. Even if I'm going to use screws to hold something together, generally I'll probably use brad nails to hold it together while the glue is drying up. Also, use it like clamps until I get the screws in place. I love this thing. The only thing I would change, which I think you would need to get a different brad nailer or pin nailer, I'm not sure, this is the first one I've ever owned, is just to get a smaller, or I think bigger gauge nails, just so they're thinner. You can see the holes when you put these in, and obviously you're going to have that with all of them, but these are quite noticeable from a distance. Okay, now on to the corded tools. I'll go through the handheld corded tools first, and then the benchtop ones. So first we're going to go with the electric planer. I've used this electric planer quite a few times, and I love it. It works really well. I've never had issues with it. It never bogs down. I actually used it on my workbench to trim up the tops of the legs, and it worked really well. It has a depth gauge. You can go up in 0.25 millimeter increments. Yeah, 0.25 millimeter increments up to 3 millimeters of depth, and it works really well. Next up we have the belt sander. Don't tell Ryobi that I cut off the cord and added a little, I think they're called kettle plugs. I did it to a couple of tools. This is the only Ryobi tool I did it to, and I stopped doing it because I wasn't happy with it, but I was trying to do a cheap DIY Festool style system. Anyway, I used to use this belt sander a lot. I think this one actually blew up on me, but it worked really well when I had it. I just put it through too much. It has adjustable speed, which I never used. I just always had it on full because, like everyone else, I hate sanding, and the belt sander made it very quick on the high setting to sand. Just quickly with the OnePlus tools, I have quite a few batteries. There's another one. Oh, actually, I have one more tool. Sort of. I have the portable USB charger. Now this thing has a, it's a 2.1 amp plug and a 1 amp plug, both at 5 volts. The reason why I didn't have it over here is because it's actually charging my phone right now, which is what I use to record. 2 black ones die very quickly, but the lithium plus ones work really well and last quite a long time. I can, out of the 5 amp, I can get my entire driveway and garage blown out with the leaf blower, and that takes me roughly about 20 minutes. Now, the portable charger is great. It's a great idea. I'm glad they brought it out. I actually take it to work sometimes because a lot of times I don't have a PowerPoint, and it's amazing. Next of the corded handheld is my biscuit joiner. Now, I have only used the biscuit joiner a few times. The only thing I've found so far with it, I've only used it a few times, but the depth gauge has a little arrow, and I bought size 10. I bought number 10 biscuits and I set it to number 10, but it didn't actually go deep enough. So I've set it to 20, and that's a good depth for the 10. So I'm not sure if I just need to adjust it or what, but I don't know. It does the job, it works really well, and I like it. Okay, now onto the benchtop tools. First up, I'll do the sander. Now this has the disc sander on the front and a belt sander on the top. I use this tool quite often, except for I do find it bogs down if you put too much pressure, both on the disc and on the belt. They're both driven at the same time, so when you turn it on, they're both going, which I actually don't like that. I wish that you could isolate them. Did add on this little coupling over here for dust collection, which the dust collection on this is actually really good. You can actually loosen the screw over here and lift the belt up, and there's a fence that you can put on it so that it is more like a linisher. It does work really well, and for the size of it, it works really well, but it does bog down if you put too much pressure. Next up, we have the scroll saw. Now the scroll saw I used for, it was 2 hours I worked out, I used for the Shadowbox build, and it never missed a beat. The only issue that I have with it, if you loosen it to take the blade off, or for instance, when I was doing the Shadowbox, I needed to remove the blade, put the blade through the MDF that I was cutting, and then attach the blade back on. And that's why I got a scroll saw, so I could do that. But the thing is, to get to the bottom, you need to take off this cover. And when you need to do that a lot during your project, it's easy to just leave the cover off, but then it's dangerous because you've got spinning parts in here. I do wish there was an easier way to actually remove the blade and replace it without having to take off this safeguard. It is actually variable speed. The base also rotates up to 45 degrees, I believe. I'm not sure, I haven't actually done that yet. Pretty sure all scroll saws have it, but it also has this little airbag thing here that when the blade goes up and down, pumps air through this hose and out the nozzle at the blade to blow the sawdust away. I found that really helpful when I was cutting through the MDF, because MDF makes actually a lot of dust. Next up, we'll talk about the pressure washer. Now again, this was another tool that I got for free from the Ryobi Instagram challenge. I actually use this to clean my entire driveway. I think I'll put a video on Instagram, which I'll have a link to down below if you want to check it out. And it did a great job at cleaning my driveway's pavers, and they're a pain to clean, and this thing did a great job. The only thing that I would change is that this reel up here is for the hose, for the handle, but you have to take it off every time. I just think it would be so much better if you could just reel out the hose. It's always plugged into the machine, and then just reel it back up when you're done. But you have to actually remove the entire hose from the reel and then screw it on down the bottom here. Second last tool is the bandsaw. Again, another tool that I got from the Instagram contest, but I actually really have wanted one of these for a long time. I used to have a cheap bandsaw that I never used because I don't think I ever set it up right, and I actually really hated it and never cut straight. It was just rubbish. This thing, I pulled out of the box, brought it in here, cut through a piece of wood, dead straight, no issues at all, and I love it. It has a lot of power for the size of the unit it is, and from what I've used it for so far, I've never had any issues. It cuts straight. Okay, lucky last is my thicknesser planer. This is my newest Ryobi tool and I love it. Funny story, I actually bought this and then half an hour later got the notification from Ryobi on Instagram that I had won their challenge. Now this is now my favorite tool in the shop. I use a lot of pallet wood and this thing, it cleans it up beautifully. Only negative I have is the dust collection port is very small and it gets blocked very easily. Even with the vacuum hooked up to it, it still gets blocked really easily. Which reminds me, I actually also have a shop vac, which is in one of the cupboards at the moment, so I won't bother getting it out, and it works really well. I actually connected up to a 55-gallon drum that I turned into a tornado system, and it works really well. Okay, so that concludes my Ryobi tool collection. Let me know what you think down below. If you have any of the tools and there's anything you think I left out, leave a comment down below. Also, let me know what you think of the tool. Now, keep in mind that this is my opinion. It's for how I use the tools, what I use the tools for. I think if I was a tradie and used these tools every single day on a work site, I probably would have a completely different opinion. But for what I use them for, I'm very happy with them. If you liked my video, hit subscribe and that like button down below. And you can also follow me on social media. I'll have links down the bottom in the description for Instagram and Facebook. And Ryobi, sponsor me.